There we go. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the February 2022 version of our the second Tuesday YouTube lecture series. Thank you all for joining us. We are recording this session and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. If you want to look at past lectures, if you just go to YouTube and look and search for Friends of the Savannah Coastal Wildlife Refuges, you'll find our page. We got 4 lectures posted there now. This one will be posted in the next day or two. I'm very happy to welcome tonight our guest speaker, Ms. Carolyn Brouwer from the National Wildlife Refuge Association. She's going to be giving a talk here in just a minute. Just a couple of quick announcements. One is that I'd like to announce that we are coming out of hibernation soon. We haven't had a lot of activities going on during the pandemic shutdown, but on April 30th, we are going to have our first in-person meeting since the spring of 2019, actually. That's going to be our Friends annual membership meeting at the Beach Hill Pavilion at Savannah National Wildlife Refuge. That's assuming there's no new spikes, no new variants that show up. But as of right now, we're planning to do that in person. And at that session, we're going to roll out our Friends Forward program, which is our way of looking forward now, coming out of this period of inactivity, hoping to involve a lot of our friends and supporters in helping us plan for activities for the coming year or two. Also to hope to recruit some new leadership and both on our board of directors and on some committees. We're also going to kick off our latest photo contest, which this year is going to have some new twists and some new treats for it. And we'll be announcing some of those pretty soon. But I just hope that everybody marks your calendar down for April 30th, and more details will be coming soon on to what to expect from that. And again, we're really hoping to get a lot of input from our members and friends on where we go from here as we launch what we're calling Friends Forward, which is the I know, Carolyn, we stole that name from some other activities, but that's our idea, is really looking forward now to where we're going to head from here. The pandemic shutdown occurred right after, within a week after we had turned over our pavilion that we had raised funds for years and had built. We turned that over to the service. Less than a week later, it shut down, and we've not been able to use it since then. So we're really looking forward to things to reopen and start offering some sessions and services to our members again. So enough of me. Our guest speaker tonight is Carolyn Brouwer. She's the Vice President for Government Affairs from the National Wildlife Refuge Association, which is a national lobbying organization that kind of keeps an eye in DC on the legislative and executive branches on issues and legislation that impact the National Wildlife Refuge System. Carolyn is not a stranger to our area. She's a native from Charleston. Her family still lives there. She got her law degree from the University of South Carolina. She comes to the NWRA from Ducks Unlimited, where she had a similar role as advocating for the refuge system in Ducks Unlimited. Also, interestingly enough, has a history of being a Peace Corps volunteer in the Ukraine. I don't know if she still speaks Ukrainian, but there's how closely she's following what's going on over there. But she has an interesting backstory as well. So, without further ado, I am going to turn the meeting over to Caroline. And Caroline, you can take it from here.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate the invitation to be here tonight. So I never spoke Ukrainian very well. I lived in the eastern part of Ukraine, so I spoke Russian. But yes, I am following it. It's pretty awful what's happening over there. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me one second. There we go. All right, can everybody see that? I assume that's a yes. I'm gonna close myself out. All right, so I want to talk to y'all tonight about wildlife refuge policy, what's happening in DC, and also what the National Wildlife Refuge Association is working on nationwide, and how we're working, especially in Region 4. We haven't been doing much work down at Savannah, but we've been doing a fair amount of work actually around Savannah and Region 4. So I did want to talk about that as well. My email address is on here. Please feel free to contact me. That did not work. Okay. So what is the National Wildlife Refuge Association? We were formed in 1975 by retired refuge managers, and they felt like there was not a group of people and there were no voices talking about the National Wildlife Refuge System in Washington, D.C. We do have staff in D.C. and around the country. There are not very many folks in D.C. I think there's 4 or 5. I was in DC until recently, and I have moved out of the state, actually. Well, the region. It's not a state. We do work on a national level to influence policy, and we work on a local level on impacting individual refuges. We have, I'll talk about this on the next slide, but we do have staff in all across the country, in Southern California, Alaska, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, and also Puerto Rico. There's a couple other places we have staff. So you can see this is our staff right here. Jeff Haskett is our president. Jeff is the former regional director in Alaska. He retired from the Fish and Wildlife Service, I believe, in 2016. Marco Aguilar is our new COO. He just started with us in the beginning of August. And then you can see the staff that we have, which is on the left. Those folks are all full-time. Jessica is in Puerto Rico. Debbie, Courtney are both in Washington, D.C. And then Eden's in Houston, Julie is in Florida, and Angie is in Southern California. And then these folks on the right are the ones that I really wanted to talk about. These are all regional representatives. And these folks are the ones who are really working at a local level and with our local refuges. John Andrew is the Florida Refuge Liaison, and Mike Bryant is our liaison and our representative in North Carolina and South Carolina. And then Mark Miseas was our COO, and he has retired again. He retired from the Fish and Wildlife Service a number of years ago, and then he just retired from the Refuge Association, I guess when Marco started, so at the beginning of August. But he's based outside of Atlanta, so he's in Georgia. So we have a fair number of folks down in Region 4 in the Southeast. So what does the Refuge Association do? Our primary focus that we work on is the top button. We work with Congress. That is a large part of what I do, is to try and get good policy passed through Congress, and I do a lot of appropriations work. So funding, it's specifically refuge operations and maintenance, which is what pays for everything that happens on National Wildlife Refuges. It pays for staff, it pays for maintenance, a lot of it pays for roads, all that kind of stuff. We do have an urban wildlife refuge program, which we are currently growing. Angie Horn is our staffer down in Southern California, and she's our urban wildlife refuge program director. And we are working with Fish and Wildlife Service to hire 2 folks on the East Coast, one of whom is going to be based out of New Jersey, and the other one is going to be based at the Loxahatchee, Arthur M. Marshall Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge in Florida. We do a lot of work with Refuge Friends groups. We have a partnership with an organization called the Coalition of Refuge Friends and Advocates. And if you are not a member of their Facebook page, you should join us. Corfa is a small nonprofit, and I'm not even actually sure they're a listed nonprofit or a registered nonprofit, but these are all volunteers, and we work really closely with them to deliver Friends work for friends around the country. It's mostly led by Joan Patterson and Cheryl Hart, and we've been doing a webinar series since June of 2020, when a little bit after COVID started, where we have been doing a series of webinars.
You're not going to last this.
Partially on advocacy, but also on board maintenance, board management, things about friends groups, which I'll need to know. Accessibility of websites was a recent webinar that we did. And then I've got here specific refuges on the ground. We do a lot of work with refuges. These people that I listed here on the right, these regional representatives, this is mainly what these folks are doing, is they're working with specific refuges on the ground. And I will get into that in a few minutes as well. Down in the Southeast region, we are working real closely with the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge with the Twin Pines mine. And we're also doing some, a ton of stuff up in Region 5 in New England as well. We do a lot of work with the administration, work with Fish and Wildlife Service, and mostly Department of the Interior, but we do some work with NOAA because of the Marine National Monuments. But the vast majority of the work we do at the administration is through the Interior Department. And we do, we have contact with the White House, but I mean, not a lot. And then I do a lot of work with coalitions and partnerships. Most of these are national organizations that we work with to deliver things like, climate change legislation. We're working on 30 by 30 and refuge expansion, that type of thing. So that's really in a nutshell what the Refuge Association does. We have a fairly small staff, but we have a pretty wide reach. So I did want to briefly talk about state of affairs here in DC with Congress and the administration. And you will see this picture is caribou at the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. That's one of the big issues we're working on right now. So a couple of the priorities that Congress has for 2020, we are currently in the 117th Congress. This is the second year of that Congress. Each Congress is 2 years, and it's until after an election, it runs for 2 years. We are currently in the second year of the 117th Congress, so we refer to that as the second session. So they are looking to pass appropriations bills. This is what funds refuges. The president's budget request last year for 2022, which is the current fiscal year that the federal government is running off of right now, they had finally a much larger increase in request for refuges. The request was $584 million, and the current funding is 503. Congress is not going to pass an appropriations bill. They're working on it, but we have been working under a continuing resolution since the beginning of October. So we are in the fiscal year 2022, but we are still working under just flat funding from last year, which was that lower number of 503 million. We were really hoping to get that $584 million number so that we could bump up appropriations so that refuges could hire staff, could have more law enforcement folks on your refuge, get some maintenance work done, that kind of thing. The next item on here is to pass the Biden administration's social agenda. That's what I refer as the Build Back Better bill. Build Back Better, as y'all might have seen in the news, is taking a little siesta, a little hiatus right now. They don't have the votes for it right now. So I don't know what's going to be happening with Build Back Better. There is not a lot of stuff in there, not a lot of funding in there for refuges. The big thing that's in there is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Back in 2017, when Congress passed the Tax Act, they opened up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge for oil and gas development. And so there is a provision within Build Back Better, which would reverse that and close that oil and gas development program. Another priority that they have is to pass voting rights and also to install a Supreme Court nominee who has yet to be named. Challenges that we are facing. Things aren't really getting done because the Democrats have a slim majority in the House and the Senate. And also Senator Lujan from New Mexico is out until March at least. He had a stroke and is not going to be back for, I believe, in about 6 weeks. And so the Democrats only have 49 votes right now. So nothing's really getting done right now. And Democratic Senators Manchin and Sinema have stopped the majority of this Biden agenda. Senator Manchin was the one who came out in December and said that he was not going to be supporting Build Back Better, which is why that bill has not been passed. It was passed by the House, but it has not been passed by the Senate. So this is what the Democrats are working on in the House and the Senate. And this is what they're all thinking about. They're all thinking about the elections in November. This is the Senate map. I'm sure, as everybody here might be aware, the House of Representatives is up every 2 years. And so every member of the House is going to be up for re-election in November, but only 1/3 of the senators are up every 2 years. So the ones that are highlighted in red or blue, these are the ones who are up for re-election. You can see the light blue shades are the incumbent Democrats, and the light red shades are the incumbent Republicans. And the dark red are the retiring Republican senators, and this dark blue is retiring Senator Patrick Leahy. Of note, Senator Leahy from Vermont and Senator Shelby from Alabama are the chair and ranking members of the Appropriations Committee. They are both retiring this year. So we are hoping that they can get an appropriations bill passed. They are both the chair and the ranking of that committee, the full committee. And so we are hoping that they can push a bill through, Because if we have a year-long continuing resolution, we are talking flat funding. They have to get a bill passed, in order to get that elevated number so that refuges can have increased funding for this next year. So this is what's on everybody's mind in Washington, D.C. right now. Biden administration. A lot of it's very similar. The Biden administration is Democratic led, and so is the House and the Senate. So I will go ahead and skip all of this. Build Back Better, climate change, voting rights. We are looking at the president's budget request, which should be coming up fairly soon. The State of the Union is March 1st. We typically see the president's budget request come out, it outlines their funding priorities for the next year. And that's when we find out what their request is for the refuge system. I've heard March 1st that they might put it out the same day as the State of the Union. And I've heard that it might go into March, later into March. And they are still talking about these 4 pillars. Every time you talk to any member of the administration, even just refuge folks, they talk about climate change, COVID, racial equity, and improving the economy. These are the 4 pillars that they're talking about, which are the priorities of their administration. So I'm gonna skip this slide and go into this. So I wanted to talk about what we're doing to put the Refuge Association, what we're trying to do nationwide to put to increase capacity for refuges, to increase funding for refuges, to change policies surrounding refuges. The urban program is something that we have been building out for a number of years now. We have a really incredible staffer working on urban refuges in Southern California. Her name is Angie Horn. She was recently promoted in December to become our urban program director. And she is working with Fish and Wildlife Service really closely, not only just in Southern California at the San Diego complex, but also nationwide, trying to really build out this urban wildlife refuge program so that we can really see very strong programs in these urban centers. Down in Florida, Florida is an interesting place for us. We have a staffer down there, also amazing, Julie Morris. She is really keyed into Florida politics. She knows a lot of landowners in Florida, mainly working north of Lake Okeechobee, but she is working with a lot of ranchers to conserve lands within the Everglades Headwaters National Wildlife Refuge. Part of what she is doing as well is we are talking about wildlife corridors up through the state of Florida. So that would run all the way up to Georgia through, I believe it curves over towards the Florida Panhandle. But there's Florida panther, there's Florida grasshopper sparrow that they found on some of these these ranches down in the Everglades headwaters. We are really, really prioritizing this work down there to see if we can get Land and Water Conservation Fund dollars put down in this landscape. It's a really prime opportunity for us, because a lot of these areas, if these ranchers sell, they're going to be selling to developers. There's going to be housing projects. There's going to be a target coming down to your, local National Wildlife Refuge. So the Florida Everglades Headwaters is a really important place for us. There's also a lot of talk about the landscape conservation designs. Julie is really helping with that, where we're talking about doing some refuge expansion in South Florida and really, sort of work on this climate change build out so that species have connectivity to land, so that they can move, so that they have places to go when areas are inundated or the weather gets too warm for them and they have to migrate north. Refuges are very scattershot around the country, particularly on the East Coast, and they are not connected. And that is something that we are really trying to work on and really prioritize within the administration and within partner organizations that we work with. Another priority that we have that we're working on is the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. I understand that y'all had a speaker a month or two ago to talk about Okefenokee. We are working in Georgia to oppose the Twin Pines mining permit. This is the Okefenokee Refuge is, it's the largest it's the largest refuge in the east of the Mississippi. And, it's a wilderness area. This is a really, special place that really needs to be protected. And we're working with a lot of local partners in Georgia to stop this mine, which is outside the boundaries of the refuge. But as we all know, if you impact water outside the refuge, it impacts the water on the refuge as well. Another big issue that we're working on and working with Congress on is the border. This is yours truly. I went down to, this is at Lower Rio Grande National Wildlife Refuge in South Texas. There were a number of miles of border fencing built during the end of the Bush years. So 2006, 2007, 2008-ish. So there were some levees built in this area and then fences on top. The Trump administration really ramped that up. It's just a very bizarre place down there. They've only got wall units on places that they own. And so you'll be driving down, these units of the National Wildlife Refuge System of Lower Rio Grande, because there's 114 units of that refuge scattered all along the river. It's an east-west corridor down there. And so you go down there and there will be a unit of the refuge, which is say 2 miles wide, and they'll have a 2-mile border fence there, and then it ends. And there's a big gap of 2 or 3 miles. And then there's another unit of the refuge system, and there's another, 30-foot tall fence there. So this was me standing down at one of the gates down on the refuge, trying to show the scale of how tall these fences actually are. We've had, there's been a lot of data coming from, from down on the border, particularly in South Texas, where the river's right there. There's different challenges in Southern Arizona where there's 3 more refuges that are impacted and have fences put on them because they're on the border. But down in South Texas, you've got a lot of flooding. It's a floodplain. These waters rise, and all of the wildlife, we've had tons of turtles stuck in these gates. They can't get past these fences once the water comes up from flooding. So it's highly destructive, particularly in South Texas, just because there's nowhere for these species to go once the floodwaters start coming up. And then in Southern Arizona, it's a whole different story. These are desert areas, and desert takes many more years to rejuvenate and renew. So one of the things that we've been working on is trying to get some funding from Congress to not only remove the border fencing in areas that are sensitive on refuge lands, but also to do some restoration work. The Fish and Wildlife Service gave me some numbers. This is about 6 months old, this number, but we were told that the projected restoration cost just for refuge lands is $100 million. So it's a lot of money to do restoration work on these 4 refuges. I do have the Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge listed here in South Texas. There have not been any fences built on Santa Ana because we were able to get language in the appropriations bills for the last several years exempting Santa Ana from any border fencing. So I don't know if y'all have ever been down to Santa Ana, but it's at the very southern tip of Texas. And it's a really interesting place because we've got North American species that migrate, and that's about as far south as they'll migrate. And there are South American neotropical species that will fly north, and that's about as far north as they come. So you can go down to Santa Ana and you can see species from North and South America. It is really a very interesting and very, very cool refuge. Another priority that we have, this next 2 are Alaska. So this is a map of the Eisenbeck National Wildlife Refuge. We have been working on this for, I believe, since 1980, since ANILCA was passed, the Alaska Native Interest Lands Conservation Act. So that was passed in 1980. A lot of these refuges in Alaska were created at that time, or their boundaries were set at that time. So what's happening here is there's an all-weather airport at Cold Bay, and there's a town in King Cove. And King Cove really wants to be able to get via road up to Cold Bay. But it is through all these sensitive wetlands at the Eisenbeck National Wildlife Refuge. A lot of this is wilderness area. So you can see the hash marks are all the wilderness area. So what they've done is they have built a road. The town has built a road all the way up here, and they've built a road from Cold Bay. So they're just waiting for their road to be approved. So we've been working for years to prevent this road. There have been ferries that have gone across Cold Bay. There's helicopters, there's been air and boat traffic that's been built, a lot of infrastructure that has been developed so that there doesn't have to be a road, but they're still talking about a road. And then Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is another huge priority. We are so close to reversing the 2017 Tax Act, which did open up oil and gas development in this area. It was just on the coastal plain. And that Tax Act actually passed, I believe, 2 years, not even 2 years after the Obama administration proposed that the entire refuge be wilderness area. So they took this proposed wilderness area and they put oil and gas development onto it, especially an area which has, frozen tundra. We're talking about permafrost that is melting because of climate change, and we're going to be putting oil and gas development in this area, which is critical for the porcupine caribou herd. It's critical for the Gwich'in people, the Inupiat people who live up there. So this is an area that we just firmly believe should be left pristine and left wilderness, and there should be no oil and gas development in there. The Build Back Better bill that I talked about a few minutes ago, there is language in there that would reverse this tax act, but it also would buy back the leases that were sold a little over a year ago. It was the beginning of January. Those leases were finalized on January 19th of 2021. So a day before the administration ended. Another thing, I mentioned this when I was talking about South Florida, but this picture here is of the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge, which is on the eastern shore of Maryland, which is really sort of a, prime example for the refuge system of impacts from climate change and sea level rise. And I was talking to Rick before this meeting started, and we were talking about the impacts that y'all are seeing down at Savannah. And I know that a lot of these coastal areas are really starting to see, really immediate visible impacts of climate change and sea level rise. So the question is, how do we protect National Wildlife Refuge? How do we protect wildlife species in an era of climate change? Climate change is happening. What do we do about it? How do we take the refuge system, which is this enormous area of land, and how do we provide habitat so that species can move? And these ecosystems are going to be shifting. They will be shifting north, and we need to figure out a way now to be able to address that and really provide wildlife species with a place to go. And finally, my last one, appropriations. This is what, honestly, I have been working on. I've been at the Refuge Association for 7 years, and I was the Ducks Unlimited for almost 7 years before that. And appropriations is one constant that I have been working on for years and years and years. The refuge system is wildly underfunded. If you look here, you've got law enforcement, you've got wildlife surveys, controlled fire, wildlife biologists, refuge managers, infrastructure. Everything that happens on refuges happens because of appropriations dollars from refuge system operations and maintenance. And if we don't find a way to increase funding, when I started doing this work back in 2008, we were a little bit under $500 million for funding, and we're currently at $503 million. We're at level funding, the same level of funding that we were at in 2010. So 12 years has passed and we're at the same amount of funding. And if you add in inflationary costs, if you add in salary increases, if you add in the increased cost of everything that we all know has happened over the last 12 years, the refuge system has lost 1,000 staff in that time because they don't have the funding. There are whole states that have one refuge law enforcement staffer, one for the entire state. There are states that have no visitor services staff. Over half of refuges aren't even staffed at all. So it's a crisis situation. And this is something that we are working pretty hard on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share. And I see a couple of questions on the chat. I don't know if those are questions or comments, but. So it says Savannah and Wausau National Wildlife Refuges are designated urban refuges. I didn't know that Savannah was. That's great. Is it one of the, Rico, is it one of the priority 14 designated urban refuges? I don't think it was.
That I'm not sure. I'm
Okay.
not sure about that. Yeah, but they are, Savannah is sort of natural because it's, you know, right across the river from downtown. Now, Wausau is a barrier island, which is only accessible by boat. But because I think because of its zip code or something, it ended up being listed as an urban refuge. But those are the two that are designated here, even though Pinckney, which is right outside Hilton Head, is our most visited refuge. It's not a big enough statistical area to qualify, apparently. So.
Yeah, I believe out of the 568 National Wildlife Refuges, over 100 of them, I believe, are urban refuges or considered urban refuges. I'm not sure exactly what the criteria is. I believe it's within 20 miles or 50 miles of a urban area that's 250,000 people or above. It's something like that. So yeah, I'm not surprised that Savannah is. What are y'all familiar with the urban program and the additional funding that they've done with the designated urban refuges?
We've heard from refuge staff a little bit about it, but not much detail at this point. No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm by no means an expert on the urban wildlife refuge program, but my understanding is that they've got 14, because there's 8 regions in the country, right? But Alaska doesn't really count. So we take Alaska off the table. So they selected from those other 7 regions, they selected 2 refuges within each region to be a designated urban refuge. And what they're doing is they're going through the country, and depending on how much funding they have through appropriations, they're picking 1 or 2 of those each year and adding $1 million to their base budget so that they can build out this program in the community and they can have visitor services there. San Diego is the first one. I might be able to rattle off all the designated urban refuges. I think it's San Diego in Southern California, Tualatin in Portland, Oregon, Minnesota Valley is the latest one, I believe. Via de Oro is one in Arizona. New Mexico. I always get it confused. John Hines in Philadelphia is one as well. Detroit River is one in Michigan. So there are a number of them. I believe we're up to 7, maybe. I don't think I listed 7, but I think we're up to 7 right now. But we're looking to do a build out of this program. I had a meeting this morning on appropriations with this nationwide coalition that I work with. That the Refuge Association has been leading this coalition. It's been around for 25 years. It's called CARE, and we had a meeting this morning to talk about this. And we're going to be proposing that they build out that program. I think it's like $25 or $30 million total. I believe they're at 10 or 11 right now. So that's our request for this next year, because we really believe that these refuges that are close to urban areas, particularly during COVID, a lot of them are seeing more visitorship as well. Now, I don't know about Savannah, since y'all mostly been closed this whole time and y'all are doing construction. Y'all may not have seen that surge in visitors that a lot of these other refuges have seen, but it's been pretty intense in a lot of places. A lot of visitors at a lot of different refuges.
Well, certainly we've seen the staff issues that you talked about as well. There are considerably fewer members on staff now than when I started volunteering back in 2008, I believe it was. And we are down to 1 law enforcement officer to cover 7 refuges extending over 100 miles of coastline. So could you explain the 30 by 30 program for people who aren't familiar with that?
Sure, absolutely. Sorry, I use shorthands all the time, and I apologize. Not everybody knows what all my shorthands are. So 30 by 30 is it's a worldwide effort, actually, to conserve 30% of lands by 2030 and 30% of waters by 2030. The United States is, because of the marine national monuments that are managed by the refuge system, there are 4 marine national monuments in the Pacific and 1 in the Atlantic Ocean, and those total conserve 26% of the United States waters. So we are pretty close to the 30% number just for waters. Not quite there for land. We're at, I believe, about 12% conserved right now. The refuge system has a lot of those lands, particularly in Alaska. There's like 95 million acres of lands in the refuge system across the country, excluding the waters. And I believe 80 million of those are in Alaska. So it's a well, the vast majority of the acres in the refuge system are in Alaska. But yeah, it's a nationwide effort. You might have heard the administration May of last year, I believe, they came out with their 30 by 30 proposal, which they've embraced. They're working towards this goal of protecting 30% by 2030. And they came out with their plan, which is called America the Beautiful. And so if y'all are interested, you can look that up, and I can see if I can grab a copy of it and put it in the chat. So America the Beautiful is what it's called. They have some refuges in there, but it's not, it's very high level by the administration. It's a pretty high level document, but this was the original one. If I can get my, there it is. There's that link in the chat. So they're referring to it as America the Beautiful. There have been some efforts, I believe, in DOI, Department of the Interior, to have some projects done under this. But I know of folks who have applied for funding, but I don't think there's any funding coming down quite yet for this. But, you know, from my perspective, what I would really like to see, it's a climate change thing, right? It's protecting lands and waters and wildlife populations for climate change. And how do we manage this into the future? And so what I would really like to see through this program is, you know, them really talking about, you know, the sea level rise issues that a lot of these coastal refuges are facing. You know, I think, you know, for a lot of these areas, that's the big thing, is sea level rise. And how do you deal with saltwater intrusion onto these freshwater areas? You know, there are a lot of marsh areas that are turning into open water because of sea level rise. So does that help?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
I had one question from Matthew Emmer, one of our board members. He wants to know what's the best way as a local friends group to help elevate our local concerns up to the national level?
That is a great question. So we are looking in the next month or so for the appropriations process to start in the House. And I'm going to be reaching out to friends groups nationwide to ask friends groups to submit testimony to the House and to the Senate. The Senate's usually a little bit later. I think last spring, the House requests were due in March. I don't think the Senate was due until April or May. So there's two different deadlines, unfortunately. But yeah, that's one good way that we can, that y'all can, you know, make your voices heard, is to draft some testimony. It's maximum of 4 pages. It could be 2 paragraphs if you wanted it to. But what we ask friends groups to do is to, you know, talk about how funding, and the lack of funding in particular, how it's impacting your local refuge, that you only have 1 law enforcement staff, that your refuges are, you know, 2 hours away from each other. And, you know, I'm totally making these numbers up, but, you know, Tybee only sees, you know, your law enforcement staffer for 4 hours a week, and Savannah sees them for 1 day, or, you know, whatever the case may be. You know, it is not a sustainable situation where you used to have 30 staff to run a refuge, and now you've got 6. You know, that's not sustainable. So I don't know what y'all's numbers are down there. I'd actually be curious if you know what your staffing levels are, and how much, and where they were back in 2008 when you were first started volunteering there.
I don't know exactly the numbers. I know that it's we have acquired more acres. We've opened up a new visitor center, and are doing that with considerably fewer staff than we used to have. And of course, relying more on volunteers. Pinckney Island National Wildlife Refuge, our most visited refuge, has not had any staff assigned there. It's been run exclusively by volunteers, including all the, you know, the maintenance and the mowing and that sort of thing. So, and I know we just lost they just had some sort of a change where you could no longer be a part-time law enforcement and do other things. And so we lost 1 part-time person there, and then another full-time person retired. So we're down to 1. And it takes forever, even when you can get a position, when you're allowed to fill a position, it takes forever, you know, to get it done. You know, to do it, because it's all done at the national level, and it takes months and months and months for the job search and to get someone get approved.
Yeah, the hiring process is definitely something that's a problem. We have talked to Martha Williams, who's the acting director, about that. the acting director of the Fish and Wildlife Service. I've talked to Cynthia Martinez about it as well. She's the chief of the refuge system in DC. We hear that complaint from literally everybody. Every refuge is dealing with lack of staff, and it's taking forever to hire people. I mean, a lot of places it takes a year and a half to get a person in there. So, and by that point, you've lost another person, and then you have 2 vacancies, and so it's a huge problem. So Matthew, that's what I would say. The big immediate thing right now is for appropriations. I don't know the exact number that we're asking for. I believe we're talking $712 million for the refuge system. So it would be a big increase over even what the president's budget request was last year. But we're going to put out guidance with sample testimony. I will include our testimony from last year so you get a much bigger picture. When I do my testimony to the House and the Senate, I do a lot of these, national programs. So I have a lot more included in mine, but I also send out, Friends sample testimony so you can see what other Friends groups have been talking about. I don't expect Friends groups on a local level to be talking about, these national issues or the Eisenbeck Refuge or something. I mean, that's not something that we expect or, think you should be doing. But, where the local Friends groups can help is to contact your member of Congress on an individual level, send in testimony to the House and the Senate for appropriations, and really talk about the impacts to your local refuge. If anybody on here has, any people skills and knows your member of Congress or your 2 senators, and, I know that Ossoff and the other senator, Warnock. Yes. I believe that I know that Senator Ossoff went down to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, I believe over the summer. So I know he's been down there. I don't know if Raphael Warnock has been or not, but I do think it's important to get in and talk to their staff as well. They might have offices in Savannah. I'm not sure. It's a big enough urban area that they might actually have staff there. But yeah, invite your members of Congress out. Even if they don't come out, at least they've got the invitation and they've got the words National Wildlife Refuge in their brains and they can see that request. So that's what's really helpful. That kind of stuff is really helpful. So if any of y'all want to sign up for our, let me see if I can get y'all that link as well. So we have a friends list that we send stuff out to folks fairly regularly. But I can send y'all the link to sign up if you'd like to sign up and get on the emails. Sign up for Refuge Friends News.
They're good about it. They don't bombard us with emails, but they are they're very useful. And also there are quarterly now Zoom meetings like this where we're given updates from you and from other members of the NWRA and from Fish and Wildlife, updates on what's going on as well.
Yep. Yeah, we do a quarterly call where I do a very similar format as this. I feel like I get more in depth into the nitty-gritty details of what's actually happening, but a lot more detail than probably most people want. But we do that quarterly. We just did our last one in I believe like January 15th or so, and the next one will probably be in early April. But yeah, we do that one quarterly, but we also have a number of webinars, like I said earlier, where we work with the Coalition of Refuge Friends and Advocates and really, focus on, issues that impact friends groups as well. So it's not just DC advocacy policy stuff.
Well, great.
Yep.
Any other questions for Caroline? I've got one. I've got to ask. Obviously, you're not in DC anymore because I can still see sunlight behind you. So where have you moved?
So that's a very good question. I have moved. I'm no longer in DC. My husband is a chemist and he applied for jobs all over the country and he was accepted at a job in Oahu. So we have moved to Hawaii. Yes.
Oh, that's too bad. That's
really terrible. So.
Well, that explains all the sunshine out there. Okay.
Well, it explains why I didn't want to do this last month because we were in the middle of our
midst of moving.
So,
okay.
Yes.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions for Caroline? If not, Caroline, thank you very much for taking the time. I know it must be a hectic time for you with the move and all, but we really do appreciate the update. And we'll be posting this on our YouTube page as well. So unless anybody has any other questions, I think we can let Caroline go and get back to moving in. And then we'll see you all next month. The tentative topic for next month is going to be how to avoid all the nasty critters you can run into on the refuge. This is a talk I gave to the refuge staff a few years back about bites and stings and what to do with some of the more dangerous critters you might encounter on one of our refuges. So that'll be on the second Tuesday in March, which is March the 8th. So put that on your calendar. Please save the date on April 30th as well. That'll be our, for our Friends Forward annual meeting, and hopefully a kickoff to an exciting new year for Friends Group activities. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending. And thank you again, Caroline. And we'll see you guys, everybody soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Chris.